I'm the first to tell you, like, it's not going to be scalable to do the kind of training that you want to do for people using a coach just watching people all the time. It's not that it's not appropriate in some situations, like with executives or with high level sellers, but it can't solve all the things you want. But now, I can practice for our podcast, I can practice for a negotiation, I can practice for a sales call, and have a true expert looking at what I'm doing, following a rubric that the company has designed for me, so that I'm actually giving feedback in the way the company wants to, in a sort of scalable and standardized way, but in situations that are personal to me as an employee.
Welcome to the Human Capitalist Podcast. I am your host, Trent Cotton. In this podcast, we will answer one big question. Is your HR organization future-proof? My guests are at the top of their field, and they'll be answering all of the questions that keep you up at night, including the future of work, how AI is going to impact our workforce, human capital, and of course, AI in HR. So whether you are an HR professional or a business leader, you're going to want to follow along and take a lot of notes. So with that, let's get into this episode and transform you into a human capitalist. Hello, welcome back to the Human Capitalist Podcast. I am your host, Trent Cotton, and my guest today is Nick deWilde. We spoke not too long ago, and about 5 minutes in the conversation, we found very kindred spirits, and I said, all right, got to have you on and join the podcast. So Nick, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me, Trent.
Well, I know you. Why don't you tell the audience a little bit about yourself?
Sure, happy to. My name is Nick. I've been in the talent development space for the better part of the last decade. Started actually running a boot camp to train sales, product design, growth marketing talent for fast-growing startups, and then moved on to the enterprise side. Worked at a company called deWilde Education during the sort of chaotic 2020, 2021 period. Really cool time getting to work with organizations like Walmart, Target, Disney, build upskilling programs for their frontline workers. That was really a lot of the insight that kind of brought us into how we built Exec. We heard from a lot of clients, they said, look, we want the ability to create talent development programs that are on our terms, right? That allow us to adapt to all of the crazy macro shocks that are happening. So they wanted things that felt homegrown. And they really came to us and they said, okay, like we try to do programs in-house and it's just like a massive lift. And they also have tried partnering. So they either partner with like a boutique agency, get something very custom, tends to cost too much money, doesn't scale very well, or they go to a tech platform. They have a little more scale, more cost advantage, better data gathering, but lose out on all the customization they came for in the first place. And so we built Exec to try to give them the best of both worlds. How do we give them the customization of an agency with the scale and cost advantage of a tech platform? And so I can share a lot more about what we do later on, but that's kind of the broad strokes on us.
Cool. So if you had a superpower, what would it be?
Me or Exec?
You. Yeah, you.
If I had a superpower, it's funny because I think that if you pick, there's like a certain set of superpowers that if you pick, like your life changes very dramatically, and I don't necessarily want that. So it's like I kind of want a nice superpower that sort of fits into my life easily.
Okay.
I'm literally thinking about like the power of persuasion, just because I think about I have a 3-year-old and a 1.5-year-old who I'm constantly in persuasion battles with, and so like I think of like practical daily superpowers that I might need is like power of persuading toddlers to do stuff, which may not be the most exciting one, but it is the most top of mind one given some of my battles this morning.
No, I can understand. Let me go ahead and tell you, everybody talks about the terrible 2s. It is the terrible 3s. Like my daughter, when she was 3, just morphed into this whole different persona. And then like probably about 2 weeks after she turned 4, she went right back and I'm like, oh, okay, good. I was not sure how this was going to end. So. That
is very comforting to hear because we have a major 3-nager who is a tough customer when he's not getting his way.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So, where do you see human capital changing over the next 1 in 5 years?
Yeah, so I'll share kind of from my vantage point where we say like I think when you think about the 70-20-10 L&D model, right? That the whole
Hmm.
idea that like 70% of your learning is going to come from on the job. And then you have
Right.
kind of 20% comes from coaches, mentorship, things like that. And then 10% comes from kind of instruction. Up until today, you know, um, learning and development leaders, sales enablement leaders have really only had ability to really impact the 10% with a bit less ability to impact that 20%, but at least still could sort of create coaching programs, things like that. But the 70%, there are things you can do. You can assign take homes, you can assign things, but was really a bit untouched in general.
Hmm.
And given it was the most important kind of driver of impact and growth, um, made it a little bit of like a tough role. Um, and what I think it is correct that the 70% is the most important. Experience is the most important teacher. When you look at experts,
Hmm.
experts have a big library of experiences for pattern matching to use. And I think what the best driver of creating experience is simulation as a tool. And up until, you know, very recently, simulation just was impractical for most teams to deploy on a regular basis. And because it was impractical to employ, basically L&D enablement is like fighting the battle with their hands tied behind their backs. Like
Right.
what they had access to was the like least engaging modalities of learning, which is video and lecture and things like that. And we're sort of missing out on this whole other group. And the big change, just like at one point video was not scalable because it was too hard to create and distribute. Now that's not the case. The same thing has happened with simulation. We are now with generative AI in that moment where we're going to be able to create personalized simulation distributed at scale to create experiences for people to accelerate expertise from novice to master. I think that is a huge change, and it's one that will get CEOs on board with L&D in a way they may not have been before, and it will become a big secret weapon for companies as they go into this next decade.
So, can you give an example of simulation? Because now with AI, that word takes on a whole different connotation, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So we our kind of first simulation tool is one called role plays, and role plays is a really a training tool that we developed by studying who was doing training best. Like the big
Hmm.
problem with training is it doesn't really stick. And the two challenges in there is one, creating training that actually changes behavior in the long term, but two, being able to confidently measure that it has changed behavior. And when you look at who's really good at that, you see the CIA, you see firefighters, you see Olympic athletes. And what they tend to do is they tend to use um, a lot of simulation. So the practice environment, performance environment are very similar. Very
Hmm.
expert feedback delivered quickly after a trial so that you get better. And then the ability to space out those practice sessions using spaced repetition to build muscle memory. And so when we built role plays, we said, okay, what are the real performances that are very high stakes in the business world? Well, they tend to mostly be conversation based, right?
Hmm.
You can, almost anything else you're doing on a computer where it's not in front of somebody, you can take longer, you can use AI, things like that. But like conversation has to happen live and it has to be your skill. And
Hmm.
so we think about role play as this essentially simulator for high stakes conversations. Now, prior to role plays existing, there were ways where one could create a simulated conversation. It cost, you know, one to many hundreds of thousands of dollars to create one, took a very long time to do, and was very limited in its scope. So kind of multiple choice type things with recorded video answers, stuff like that. and thus you can maybe create one for a training for a lot of people, but you couldn't create personalized ones. You couldn't deliver them at scale. You couldn't have them inserted into any moment that you want someone to be able to practice something. And so that's really the change that we've seen, where now you're going to have this modality of learning that's going to be much more common. And I think conversation is one piece of it, but I think there will be other pieces as well that will come out.
No, that makes sense. So, if I'm listening to this, there's probably the bulk of L&D, I would probably say, and I'm probably going to piss off a lot of my L&D friends, but I think they're using AI to help develop content, maybe even market content.
Yep.
But I don't think that they've made that leap that you all how can AI solve some of the gaps that we have in traditional L&D processes? So you've already kind of skirted around it a little bit, kind of tiptoed into it, but like, where can AI really provide that lift for organizations that really need to expand their L&D practice?
Yeah, I mean, I think it shouldn't be understated that like getting AI to help you create a program and create content, like you have access to expertise. So I don't want to downplay almost like anything that you're using AI for.
Oh, no, I wasn't totally not downplaying. Yeah, I'm just like, how do we level up?
Absolutely. So like that can be a huge lift in itself. I would say that the really exciting stuff that's happening got unlocked with voice. Because to me, that was what you needed for simulation, right? I could simulate someone sending you an email or simulate sending a Slack message, but it's not that exciting and interesting. And frankly, I don't think people are going to do it that much. Voice is where the rubber meets the road and got really exciting. And that came out, I would say, got ready for prime time maybe 6 to 8 months ago. And so what I think is exciting are two things. One is being able to manufacture experiences. So think like an amazing salesperson has seen, they've gotten their 10,000 hours by having hundreds, thousands of calls where all sorts of strange things happened that weren't completely expected. And that's really profound. That's how they built their expertise, so that when something comes up, they can say, oh, this is one of those.
Yeah.
The ability for a novice to get to that point, it just takes forever. And so ultimately, you have to be able to give people this ability to front load that experience in order to get them from novice to expert. And so that's really the thing that I'm excited. So it's not just the experience, it's the very fast feedback that comes after that trial. Because essentially forever, we've been rate limited by the ability of an expert to be paid to sit and observe you doing the thing that you're doing and give you really good feedback. And look, we also have a whole coaching practice with human coaches who are fantastic at what they do. But like, I'm the first to tell you, like, it's not going to be scalable to do the kind of training that you want to do for people using a coach just watching people all the time. It's not that it's not appropriate in some situations, like with executives or with high level sellers, but it can't solve all the things you want. But now I can practice for our podcast, I can practice for a negotiation, I can practice for a sales call, and have a true expert looking at what I'm doing, following a rubric that the company has designed for me, so that I'm actually giving feedback in the way the company wants to, in a sort of scalable and standardized way, but in situations that are personal to me as an employee. And
it makes complete sense that would be the natural jump for L&D. I mean, if you look at something like Microsoft Copilot, I was watching a video today and it was talking about how you can like create these agents just to help you do some of the normal course daily activities, offload some of that without sacrificing the quality of the process. It's just your time investment in the process greatly diminishes. It makes sense that it shouldn't be that hard of a leap for us to do the same thing, creating coaching agents for our employees rather.
Totally. And I think it is. I think what's coming for L&D leaders is kind of like the Moneyball moment, right? Where suddenly there's an ability to actually collect data and make decisions based on that data that we just haven't had access to before. Right? If you wanted to say, is my training program working? What would you have done? Well, you can ask people, do you feel more skilled? You can maybe ask their manager, does this person seem more skilled? But could you prove that someone had, built these skills, right? And we now have, that ability. And it's not to say that it's perfect yet. Like I don't want people to like turn this on tomorrow and say, well, like it's missing, inflections and tones. Like there are things that still like aren't as perfect as having a human coach watch something.
Mm-hmm.
But it's leaps and bounds better than before. And a similar thing happened to marketing, right? When essentially growth marketing came about as a practice, it was this marketing based on analytics and data that really changed the role, but also gave the role a lot more legitimacy in the eyes of skeptical leaders. So, you used to have CEOs be like, well, I have no idea, we're wasting half our money. I just don't know which half, right? And just not having like the feedback and results to be able to share it. I think there's something similar happening with L&D, where it's like, it's so clear that having better managers, having better salespeople, having more skilled people is a really good investment if you can prove that it's working.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the thing where the proof has always been a little bit hard to generate in a way that is compelling to skeptical people. Mm-hmm. And that, we now sell what we're selling, not just to L&D, not just to sales enablement, but to CEOs, because they look at this and they say, oh, if I could prove for sure that people got better at these behaviors, I would 100% be very excited to invest in this. Mm-hmm. If I knew I had the levers to really change behavior and skill in my company.
Well, and there's another great example that's non-business. You were talking about, elite fighters in Army, Navy SEALs is another great example. Then also too, studying Olympic athletes, like they leverage data, but they have that very intense coaching. And I think last time we spoke that you had, you spent a lot of time learning about those two in particular. What were some learnings that you kind of walked away with looking at how they coach?
Yeah, I mean, the big thing is, when you're looking at simulation, right, you think of like long distance runners or sprinters, right? Mm-hmm. If they're going to be performing in a high altitude, space, they're definitely going to be practicing, maybe even sleeping in places that are high altitude, where mm-hmm. they're able to take in less breath, right? So like the first is like, let's make this as close as possible to the environment that you're actually going to perform in. Mm-hmm. And that's a really big kind of first thing. The second thing is just being able to have a coach watching you and be able to give you specific feedback that you can put into practice the next time that you go through this. Mm-hmm. And there are lots of, modalities of how to give feedback, right? Like focus on one thing at a time, make it the most important thing so that, you're solving, a couple things, right? But I think the big thing is most people go through their lives never being, observed and giving any feedback on, right? The type of learning that human beings are naturally really, really good at is imitation, right? So like this mm-hmm. This is cultural evolution. Like we watch what elders in the tribes do. They watch, we try it ourselves, we get some feedback and we get better at it. Mm-hmm. And that type of learning, you just kind of cross your fingers is happening at work. But most people know that it's except for like a very lucky group of people, is not really happening in the way they want it to.
Well, and if you think back, pre-industrial revolution, how did you learn a new practice? You did apprenticeship, which yes. There was no schooling, no sitting in class, and then they just throw you in the environment. It's like, I want you to learn this part of the process. Once you master that, then you come to this part of the process. And the process took sometimes 4-10 years, depending on the practice. I think that we've gotten away from that. And to your point, that's how most of us learn. I mean, I had someone coach me in my early 20s as a banker. as a calling officer. I was a punk. And he was this older gentleman who had retired twice. He just loved to work, and he loved going out and putting deals together. And there were so many. God, that was 97, so I don't even want to calculate how long ago that was. I can still hear his voice in my head sometimes. Simple things that he just completely imprinted, because we would go on calls and some he would lead, some I would lead. But every time we got back in that blue Cadillac of his, it was, what did you learn? What did you learn about the client? Here's where you did really well. Here's where we still need to work on some things. And it was just this, I don't know. I'm thinking if I had something like, if I had his name was Mr. Joe. If I had a AI, I would call him Mr. Joe. There was some safety there, because I knew that I could fail in front of that client, or I could fail in that situation. And Mr. Joe wasn't going to let me fail too bad. He had the knowledge there. So I'm thinking, or I guess maybe this is a question. Do you see that maybe people would embrace the idea of leveraging an AI that's on the spot, that gives them that safety to be able to fail?
I think like having that Mr. Joe in your life is such a gift. And like the earlier you have it in your career, the more impact it makes.
Oh gosh, yes.
When I think about what this is going to look like, the thing that actually is underrated today, people, I think teams tend to use video in the wrong way. So really? What we've used video so far to mostly record a lecture and put it on video. So recording slides, recording content. Mm-hmm. What video is amazing for is actually tacit learning. So being able to film an expert at their craft, doing it in a, world-class way, and being able to present that so that someone has access to it. Like the amazing thing is, like today, we have access to the best woodworkers and salespeople and all sorts of stuff. And I rarely see that being housed, except for maybe sales enablement. But even then, it's really only capped by your bestseller, right? Mm-hmm. But the more you can have these examples where you can watch, that's really powerful. The thing that's been hard is the second part of that process is being able to do it and get feedback. And that has always relied on a Mr. Joe who mm-hmm. is patient, who is willing.
Well, he wasn't patient. Let's get that clear. He was not patient. There were things now that I've spent 20 years in once I made the conversion into HR, I'm like, God, he really shouldn't have been able to do that. So I mean, he was very knowledgeable and definitely made an imprint, and I am forever thankful for him. But whenever I did a calculation wrong, he took a bank book, which was a thing of financials. It was about the size of a telephone book, and threw it across the office and like barely missed my head. And I looked at him and I said, "You almost hit me." He goes, "Well, you won't miss that calculation up the next time, will you?" And I'm like, "Nope, sure won't." So anyway, not to derail you, but no, he was not the nicest, but he was definitely the wisest.
Well, and I think, to some degree that is a feature, not a bug, right? Mm-hmm. I'm someone who wants to be very thoughtful about the limitations of AI, right? Humans are very good at clicking in and paying attention to other humans. We want to do our best work around them. AI is not a perfect substitute for having a Mr. Joe in your life, but what it can do is it can give you some of those elements of feedback, and it mm-hmm. can watch your performance, and it can help you get better. And if you compare that with a Mr. Joe who maybe doesn't have to doesn't have to be on call full time, but can mm-hmm. give you enough time, right? Where they're in there, I think that's the winning combo, and I think that's really what a good version of this will look like. You asked a question about getting real time feedback. I think there's some awesome tools out there. Like we have some friends who run a company called Kona, and Kona does real time feedback in a conversation, that you're actually having with a direct report, where they're telling you how much talk time you have and things like that, and, mm-hmm. and giving you, real insights. So I think that's another kind of piece of it that's really powerful.
And leveraging more and more data, I think is great because it balances out sometimes the emotional response, which can sometimes be based off of perception or based off of, previous trauma. Um, what do you think in AI, in sticking with this AI and L&D space, where do you think AI is underhyped and overhyped?
I think that AI, I mean, I do think this space of like simulation and manufactured experience
Hmm.
is a place where AI is to some degree underhyped. And the reason is there are these like very expensive virtual reality simulation companies
Hmm.
that have, let's say they use AI that charge people kind of way too much to do this one virtual reality simulation thing. And I think people have not seen the power of being able to just in 5 minutes create your own custom simulation for the exact thing you need to do using purely voice and a coaching AI call. So I think that's an area where like people haven't totally seen the power of voice yet and how much it
Hmm.
can impact. I think where it's maybe a little bit overhyped is on pure play content production. Um, I think that there is you have to be to get something good. You still need good ideas to go in there, right? Like,
Hmm.
and I think it is really it can get you a lot faster. But I think pure AI content is pretty brutal to read. Um, and
It
then
is.
the there's some that are working on creating video and images, and I think there's all those things are there, but like it's hard to sort of fully rely on yet for kind of all your content production. I don't think I don't think we're that far off, right? Like you look at things like Sora, you look at things like
It's
Midjourney.
unreal.
I mean, it is all the pieces are there.
Hmm.
It's just some of the UX experiences, things like that. I don't think they're totally built yet. But I look at something like Google LLM's notebook with the podcast production.
Hmm.
Like that's amazing.
It
That's
is.
just incredible, right? So being able to like turn something you want into a podcast that people can consume, like that's something that we want to get into our platform, next year right away
Yeah.
because it's so amazing.
Well, and you've talked a lot about learning by watching, and that I guess in your vision, that's kind of the future of L&D is almost getting back to that apprenticeship style of learning, but doing it at scale. Um, I do a lot of stuff in the gym, and for probably the first 2 or 3 years, I would look at the pictures and I would do stuff. But every time I would do a squat, it was like my back would hurt. And so I worked with someone who knew what they were doing. And I was willing to do more weight because I knew that they were there. I knew that they would say, fix your posture,
Yes.
fix this, fix that. And, I'm just thinking, taking that same approach to someone in their professional career, like the changes in my body after working with someone that was professional for just 90 days is light years different. So to me, that kind of makes me excited from a performance coach standpoint
Yes.
of being able to say, hey, these are some things that I think you should work on. I'm going to work with your AI agent to make sure that we fine tune those. I'm going to pull a report over the next 30 days to see how you're doing. And then our next coaching session is going to, how do we go from there? I think I'm looking forward to that.
Yeah, I totally agree. Like the way I think you could imagine a world coming about, right, is like the way a learning program is constructed, right? There's you come in to the company and during your onboarding, the goal is help you be able to fully understand and talk about the company in the context that you're going to operate in,
Hmm.
understand your environment, things like that. And doing that through real practice sessions of where you'll actually come in contact with having to answer questions at the company. So to direct reports to future hires to customers, however you might want to do that. And then really, L&D is how do we accelerate your ramp time to productivity? And then when you're at productivity, accelerate your time to expertise,
Right.
right? And accelerate your time to expertise is just putting new scenarios in front of you that you may have to wait years to see, putting them in front of you sooner. And the if you think about why this sort of thing hasn't been done before, CEOs were always really hesitant on spending too much on training, because the idea is, what if we train them and they leave? And there's always the great rebuttal: what if we don't and they stay, right? But it didn't always resonate in the way that actually gave the team more budget to create the things that really mattered. Now that you have the ability to, in a very scalable way, do personalized training that actually drives skill development, it's going to be crazy not to. And so, and it sounds like I probably will have common cause with both you and your audience. Like, I think work is, one of the most incredible spaces and environments for growth ever, right? There's some people in our learning and education space who sort of will sheepishly raise their hand and say, I kind of sold out and went into corporate L&D. Like, I don't believe that at all. Like, I think preschool is great, grade school is great, college is great, but like, I'm 100% that, like, I think the optimal space for growing as a human being is work. And I think we will give L&D leaders the tools to scaffold work so that they can actually fully change their lives in a very short period of time while at the company, skill up in just an enormous way.
And if you think about it, if you're not mechanically inclined and something breaks, what is the first thing you go to? YouTube.
YouTube. That's right. Yeah.
And that's why it's the second highest search engine in the world, is people are looking for how-tos, these DIYs, this, how did they do that? Our brains seem to be almost acclimated to that. And so it's really interesting to kind of hear you talk about this topic, and I kind of feel dumb because I'm like, why didn't I think of that? Like, how many hours do I spend on YouTube trying to learn something new? And that's my learning style, right?
Well, and like, you can imagine, that we're like, I think sometimes people use VR in kind of silly ways as like this novelty, but if I'm like, where is it going to make a huge difference? Mm-hmm. It's going to be, you're putting on Meta Ray Bans, you are a person who works with their hands, you are looking at a machine, and it's overlaying exactly what you need to do to fix the machine. So like, learning and doing are like, your workspace is your laboratory for getting better. Mm-hmm. And like, it could be you've done it a few times on the test thing, right, where you've had to see it there, but now you can overlay it on the real thing. And like, I think there is a vision that I'm very excited about. That is, yes, we're going to have robots that are AI enabled that are going to be able to do stuff. But there's also a world where we are going to have very junior people that we can train to get much more senior than people expect very quickly. Mm-hmm. And I think if we can help win that race on the side of humanity and skill development, I'm pretty into it.
Yeah, no, that's I love that vision. And then when you were talking, I was just thinking healthcare. Like, how cool would it be to have first responders, paramedics, when they arrive on the scene, so they can look at something and it's saying, okay, check this, check this, check this. Like, just the implications are exciting. But there's been this trend, I would say probably over the last 7 to 10 years, of L&D decisions being given to the employees, basically saying you drive the key to your own career development and success. And I'm not discounting that. I am a firm believer, but you've actually written that that's all about to change. You want to explain why you think that?
Yeah, I think to some degree, it's not to say that there aren't some employees who use their L&D stipends really well. Mm-hmm. But whenever I talk to a company, I say, I talk to a manager, how many people have used their L&D stipend? It's like 10% is the max.
Wow.
Whenever I ask a company, how many people logged into, not to pick on LinkedIn Learning, but how many people logged into the LinkedIn Learning portal or the Udemy portal or whatever, it's like 10%, maybe 7%. And how many people did it enough where it actually felt like they were developing in a huge way? 3%. I don't know, right? Wow. But it's not huge. And so what that says to me is not that like humans don't want to learn and don't have sort of vision for what they want to do, but they have competing, priorities, right? Like their boss is asking them to, fix this thing now, do this project that is very mission critical. So it's always easy to kind of push off, the skill development that you want to do until later. And I think that you really do need, if you think of learning versus entertainment, right? They're both often screens that sort of sit on our desktop, right? You've got Netflix on one side and you've got, LinkedIn Learning on the other side, right? Which one's going to win? Entertainment is like geared in to like capture you. Slack notifications have social consequences. There are all these things. So like video learning to me just like that doesn't stand a chance. And so what I think learning has going for it is the social elements around it. Putting people in a cohort, putting them in a Slack group, holding them accountable, saying your manager's watching this, the company cares about you doing this. And in that world, people love to invest in this. If they know that it's in their OKRs and they're sanctioned to do this, and in fact, the company wants them to do it, maybe they might get rewarded if they do it. Like that is the environment where learning takes hold. And so I think when you put it in individuals' hands, it's sort of like saying, hey, you have unlimited vacation, right?
Right.
Yeah, it's a nice thing to do in theory and gives people some flexibility in practice, but in the end, it results in them taking like no vacation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's kind of counterintuitive. I love all the things that you said there. There was, I guess, kind of looking at L&D as being a very primary source, and I think I agree with you. I think it's coming front and center. Probably tiptoeing in 2026 or 2025, I think busting the doors down in 2026. So let's say you decide to change roles. Someone says, hey, Nick, I want you to be my CHRO. And I want you to transform this organization and get us ready for what's coming down the pike in 2025 and 2026. What would be the two or three things that you would just immediately ensure that the L&D strategy has in order to make that preparation possible?
Yeah, great question. I mean, I think the first really important thing is understanding what is this future state that we're preparing people for, right? Is it one where they're competing against AI? Is it one where the market is actively changing, right? So there's definitely like a lot of discovery that you have to do, and I don't like to be too kind of dogmatic about any one approach or tool. But let's say for a typical organization, I think the things that I really want to do is I want to make sure that our L&D efforts can actually are both effective and that we can prove it. And that to me is really important for being able to give the company confidence that L&D is a muscle that really the organization should invest in. And I think the way I think about that, right, is like I want to be able to build any programs we're doing and make sure those programs are designed around the way humans learn and develop skills, and then make sure we embed enough of the AI tools in there so we're actually able to scalably capture whether they're improving or not. The other thing that I'm doing is I'm thinking as much as possible about how can I get managers more deeply involved in the process of the L&D program design process, because where we're going is towards personalization, right? So a lot of the reason we've done cohort-based programs is, one, cohorts are really effective on the social front. So I don't discount that. But when you can have something that's personalized and have your manager be a big part of that, an active participant, someone who they may not be doing program design, but they may be using AI for that. They may be having, leaning on L&D for that help and that partnership. But the more I think that can come in, the better. And then I think the third thing that I'm thinking about is the social element of it. I think learning is also a great excuse to get human beings together,
Yeah.
talking and building relationships. And I think about stuff like offsites and stuff that involves zero tech is
Hmm.
as like the other part of this that I really want, where I want, every learning experience to be sort of a peak experience for people, right? When they think about their time at the organization, like they should think about these kind of magic moments that they had where they built great relationships with people, where they got to like explore themselves and go deeper. And a lot of that, is best done with facilitators and coaches and just gathering people into groups. And so
Right.
I think those would be kind of the three areas that I would focus. And some are a little self-serving around the way we do things, but
Right.
that is ultimately the reason why we built this platform. So take lots of considerations in mind.
Yeah, but I mean, you're solving a problem. I mean, there's a definitive gap out there that you all are trying to work on. So with all this tied up in a bow, what do you think HR professionals who are listening to the podcast in 2025, what should they start doing to prepare for the future?
I think one is really pound the table that you want AI to be part of your practice, right? And I think that not just in L&D, right? In talent acquisition and all these different places, right? Like I think get your teams comfortable, excited, starting to tinker. If you've got a company that's really scared about this tool, advocate for getting them less scared about it,
Hmm.
because it's so important, right? And if you're if you're in kind of the Silicon Valley ecosystem, you're clocking all the changes that are happening, but those changes you really don't want them to sneak up on you, because the pace of evolution is really quick right now. And
Yeah.
so keep being able to have a pulse on those things. I think is really important. And that could be just like, that doesn't have to be spending budget, just playing around with tools and trying to get people to do things for it and giving yourself some sandboxes to do that. So that's kind of thing one. I think thing two is um, understanding that we're about to have a bunch of capabilities thanks to AI that we just did not have before. Right? I've talked about some on L&D of like being able to like really diagnose who has what skills and make decisions based off that. But that always ratchets up the bar for what's expected in these roles. And so I think role by role, really understanding what's that kind of cascade of expectations that will come across all your different functional areas is really valuable and important. And then making kind of selective investments with vendors and technology, even just like piloting stuff, right?
Yeah.
To
Yeah.
really see how you can change it. Because again, some of these tools are like not, they don't deliver what they promise, right? And for some of them, there'll be something that's like it, and it will actually take a year for the real thing to come out. But you're in a place right now where like starting to experiment with this stuff is going to pay dividends. And if you
Hmm.
think about it as a portfolio of bets, you will make some bets that will pay off very high. And that could be a very big step change for the business, for the whole organization.
I love that. And it's so funny to me how so many people especially in the HR profession, they're so scared to try anything AI. Like they have all of this ironic word bias against it. And like now I can't imagine some of the stuff that I do now without my little AI agents that I've got. I mean, I've got one that has just about any routine task, I got an agent for it that does all the heavy lifting, and then I go in and I spend more of my time than I feel is valuable doing the stuff that only a human can do. And I find that I do better work that way. So I love the advice. You ready for some rapid fire?
Give it to me.
All right. So, what is a book that changed your perspective on business or HR?
I'll tell you one that changed my view on humanity, right? Which I think
Okay.
kind of has trickled down to some of that. It's a book called The Secret of Our Success by Joe Heinrich. And what it talks about is why human beings have been successful in kind of adapting to all sorts of different biospheres and environments. And what they look at is they look at shipwrecks, chronicles of shipwrecks, who survived, who didn't. The reason I look at shipwrecks is because it's this really interesting moment to be able to see what humans are good at. And when you look at shipwrecks and the logs of them, the teams that survived were always the teams who befriended native groups in those environments and spent a lot of time paying attention to them. Because that's what humans are naturally good at, imitation, like we talked about. They're good at paying attention to what prestigious, successful humans are doing and mimicking them. And if you think about that as sort of the way humans learn and develop, it really makes everything else kind of come clear for like how to be able to make human beings really successful in this world.
I like that. What about a favorite podcast or series?
I love the Acquired podcast. One of the hosts is a good friend of mine from my kids' preschool. But they recently sold out the Chase Center in San Francisco, and it was such an amazing time. They interviewed Mark Zuckerberg on stage, and I think it's been really cool seeing. I think podcasts are such an amazing medium for learning and storytelling, and just seeing how they've kind of blown up and built a huge audience around that.
That's fun. And then where can people find and engage with you if they have additional questions on what you shared today?
I'm at nick@exec.com, exec.com. Feel free to email me. You can also, on LinkedIn, I'm going to try to get better next year at kind of sharing ideas and stuff like that on there. I always say that, and then work.
Got to commit, man.
You got to commit. You're very good. I need to get tips from you. And then I used to regularly write a newsletter called The Jungle Gym to about 13,000 subscribers, and I'm going to try to get back on the horse with that too. So I would say LinkedIn, email are probably the easiest ways to get to me. And then, shoot me a note. I would love to chat. It can be, about Exec. It can be about anything we talked about today. Very, very excited to kind of connect with folks who are thinking about this stuff.
Absolutely. And then if you had one liner, a mic drop moment for all who are listening, what would it be?
You now have the ability to, in a predictable way, improve behaviors and instill skills in people. Act accordingly.
Well said, sir. Well, Nick, thank you so much for coming on. I knew that we would have a great conversation. I feel like there's still a couple of subjects that you and I could dig in on. So I feel pretty sure you'll be a returning guest.
Part two. I'm ready for it.
Thanks, right, sounds great. Well, thank you for joining. I appreciate it.
Talk soon.
And that is a wrap on another episode of The Human Capitalist. Thank you so much for choosing to tune in and invest your time with me today. I hope that you walked away with some valuable insights and actionable strategies that you can maximize your greatest asset, and that's you. But hey, before you go, don't forget to hit like and subscribe so that way you can stay in the know. The Human Capitalist movement begins with you. If you have some feedback, feel free to leave it. I'll read every comment. I want to make sure that the content that I am delivering is what you want to hear. If you want to connect further, you can find me at my link down below. I'd love to hear from you and continue this awesome conversation. Well, this is Trent Cotton, your human capitalist, and I'm going to sign off. But remember, invest in yourself, own your potential, and keep building your human capital.